Hey,
Yeah.
get involved.
Right. Hi, this is the first time we met. Yeah.
First time we met.
It's like just a
I
continuous
remember
motion.
your music video. I remember your music videos from Max Kaiser, the first one with with the gold coins.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that. Interesting. Yeah, well, no, I haven't. Yeah. Oh, epic, cool. Yeah, thanks very much.
Good stuff, man.
How you doing, Tone? You got it?
Good. How you guys doing?
Not too bad. Maxing and relaxing after a HCPP was a proper burnout for me. So I spent 3 days at home, just me, my girlfriend, my little boy, 2 dogs, and just chilled. Hey, good to start. Yeah, come on. So nice little rest before Romania. I didn't make it out.
Wait, you went back to the UK?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I didn't join the crew that kind of went from Prague to...
Did you go with them, Peter? After Prague?
To Hungary.
Yeah.
Wow, that was like 3 days ago.
Hey, it's been too much on conferences.
It's all a blur.
Yeah, no, I spent 3 days in Bucharest, and then I came here. I wanted to see the capital. I always want to get a feel for like the capital. This is very different. Cluj and Bucharest, very different.
Yeah. It's what's it like, the sort of architecture and stuff? Is it all like...
I like it here actually better, but you guys didn't hear me say that from Bucharest.
I mean, all these beautiful Soviet brutalist buildings.
Yeah.
No, you know what? I don't get that Soviet feel here. Like if you're in Ukraine or even I was in Georgia and like a lot of other Soviet republics, you really get that Soviet feel. In Romania,
is much better for that than here.
Yeah. You don't really get that Soviet feel here at all.
So what is your talk about at the conference?
Mine?
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about shitcoins. It's actually, so we literally just came back from HCPP, and we're both doing the same talks there and here. So my talks keep changing. I remember my first talk was about the price history of Bitcoin, and then I was doing that all around the world. Then I was doing the inevitable ICO bubble talk, which has the ICO bubble popped to, I don't even talk about it anymore. And that migrated to the Bitcoin value proposition. And the last slide of that presentation was to explain why shitcoins will all die. And I could never get to that last slide. So I decided to take that last slide and turn that into its own 40-minute presentation. So now I have a giant 4-part Venn diagram of depicting the shitcoins. And then we go through why they're all stupid.
So you're saying I could get you to do a mega presentation of like all these kind of concatenated together?
Yeah. And then I got to come up with like the next thing I do around the world because I speak too much. I got to come up with new presentations.
And what do you not think that? Because I'm a semi shitcoiner in that I like tinkering around. Yeah, I haven't been masternodes and stuff like that.
Less so now than a year ago.
Less so, only because wrecked.
Right. Yeah.
But the fact is that I'm up more than if I'd have just had Bitcoin. So ultimately,
you're up in what denomination?
Well, I'm up in Bitcoin than if I'd have had just the Bitcoin.
But is it in Bitcoin or is it still in Ethereum and Ripple?
No, well, part over. But it's stuff that's liquid enough.
You're doing better than usual.
Yeah. The thing is, you kind of dabble, and I'm more interested in the different kind of technologies. But I can't see a time when there won't be shitcoins, because when I was 2013 when I first got in, there was still saying people there going, well, there's Bitcoin is the only one, and these coins are all going to die. And instead, we've got like thousands.
Well, I mean, you can't stop people from doing it.
Yeah, that's the thing.
So
it's
it's not going to go away from that point of view. But
yeah,
I certainly don't think it'll ever, it just does make economic sense to live in a world where there's thousands of little currencies and we expect people to use them.
Totally agree. Yeah.
The euro existed for a reason.
Yeah. I think Bitcoin obviously is king, but I do think there's some utility in some of these other.
Well, there'll be one coin, maybe 2, maybe 3 at most, that will be king.
Yeah.
You're never going to have a world with the average person owning, 500.
And the new one, I mean,
even 10 is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
and the new ones are still coming out. And like David Schramm is about to come up with his. And I tell people, like, we need another altcoin, like we need another language.
Yeah. No, you're totally right. It's unnecessary that we have so many, but the joy of such an open and permissionless system is also negative that anyone can.
Well, it's a giant ridiculous inefficiency. Like, again, it's like languages. Like, it's a giant inefficiency. I was born in Russia, so I speak Russian, and it's becoming very inconvenient for me every year to travel through Eastern Europe because all of the languages of the other 14 countries that broke off are coming back, and they don't speak Russian anymore. And I don't see how that benefits their population. I know it's a cultural thing, but you go to and I just came from Republic of Georgia, which is I really, really enjoyed, and they speak Georgian, and Georgian has its own alphabet. And it's a little tiny country, and the young people there speak some English. The older people there speak some Russian, but the majority of people there speak Georgian, and I just don't see how that's helping their population to compete on a global scale with a language and an alphabet that is very, very difficult, and no one else speaks it but your little area.
And you notice how even in that example, they still don't find it valuable to, well, I don't know, why don't we go and learn like 5 different types of Georgian? You know, like the cultural thing, I think certainly, you know, it's very meaningful to people. I'm not going to argue against that, but it's so clear how it's not that a huge amount of diversity is valuable here.
Yeah.
It's, maybe one language, maybe 2, maybe 3.
Yeah.
But you're not going to learn 10.
Yeah, I think
makes no sense.
Languages is difficult because they're kind of, people feel like it's part of their bones, you know? Like, so you've got things like, even in Wales, you know, people trying to speak Gaelic and the channels, and giving that up is kind of giving up a part of their sovereignty, I suppose. But certainly Bitcoin, for me, really stuck out. I was actually working in the Treasury Department for as a business analyst, working in Treasury on the Treasury management systems, and I went to ACT to do a course on general Treasury stuff, and it was at that point where I saw just how many times transaction pings from A to B, when you think it's just A to B, but there's 100 different parties involved. And if we had just Bitcoin, like you wouldn't have the Treasury Department, you wouldn't need to hedge currency against others. It would be just so much more simple for world economics.
But also there's a big misunderstanding. Like, even when I try to compare it to language, like, I'm not here as an English maximalist, right? Saying that everyone has to speak English. Yeah. But what I'm saying is that the world is more efficient when everyone is able to speak the same language. And for example, if you're going to be an airplane pilot, you have to have an English proficiency, because every single international flight, or even a domestic flight, to be a pilot, you have to speak English. So there is a consensus right now as to what one of the biggest professions, what language they all have to be able to communicate. I'm sure if you're going to be an astronaut and you're going to go into space, you also have
it's Russian and English.
But so you have to know both.
Yeah, and that's basically
you're forced to know both of them.
Yeah.
I
didn't know that.
It's because of
NASA have to learn Russian.
It's because of the ISS, right? Because it's a partnership.
Yeah.
So, but you notice how even in that partnership, well, there's many more countries involved.
Yeah.
They could not justify more than sort of the 2 for political reasons.
Yeah.
It's not like he also needs to know Japanese just because there's a Japanese module.
Yeah. That's odd, isn't it?
And I think it really shows how, yes, there's a reason to have many languages in the world, but for the purpose of using it to communicate, the incentives are so strong to standardize on a small number.
Yeah.
Yes, there are many currencies in the world, and there's good reasons for them locally, but for cross-border stuff, the incentives are so strong to price things in a very small number. And it's just, like, this is really, I think, what comes down with the utility tokens argument, which is just crazy. Utility tokens do not make sense.
So here's the thing. Again, going back to, I'm not here to be an English language maximalist, but when you realize that you need a consensus on one standard, then as a logical reasoning, you have to identify what is the most logical standard for today's society. And that's how you end up being someone like myself and Peter, where we understand that there needs to be consensus for efficiency reasons, that there will only be one useful blockchain, and which is the most likely candidate to win this battle. And we're over 99% confident it's going to be Bitcoin.
Yeah.
It's just the only logical result. Like, I don't care if the Chinese is the language everyone speaks. I just don't think it's going to be that.
Well, and it's funny, like Ethereum certainly could have been in a much better position to take over Bitcoin. But the problem I think they have is you don't, like, if you genuinely need a blockchain, and by that, and I'll use the blockchain's chain of blocks definition, you of course don't need a currency for technical, for the technical reasons. If your blockchain is just to go audit a database, which is going to be sort of the vast majority of blockchain applications out there, the standard corporate thing to do, you do not need a separate currency. So to the extent you need a cryptocurrency blockchain for some small part of your problem, it makes no sense to tie yourself to something that's unlikely to succeed. It doesn't make any sense to subject your users to having another coin just for your silly little application.
Yeah.
The only thing, like the only argument for this ultimately comes down to, well, I need to go make money selling my protocol. That's where this comes from. And it's just dishonest.
I need to print money.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that 100%. I had 4 reasons as to why Ethereum could fail, and one of them, this is the economic reason, and this is why. Do you believe in the liquid sidechain? Because that doesn't have its own currency to run it, which is why the liquid sidechain or Google or Amazon can easily destroy Ethereum by providing the same functionality without a forced internal token. It's kind of like saying Amazon would have been better off accepting Amazon stock as its only currency for its own products. That's basically what Ethereum and all other blockchains are doing.
And like,
With
with Liquid, I think at a technical level, I can definitely come up with better technology than Liquid. And there's like the fact that they reuse Bitcoin source code for the data structure, so on. There's tons of little technical things there, but for the financial side of it, choosing not to do their own currency and just let this be a platform, it's just so obvious.
Yeah.
But the reason why that happens is because Blockstream's funded by other sources. They're not pursuing this crazy, dishonest ICO funding, so they don't have an incentive to do something dumb. And they do what makes sense. And what makes sense is to just accept Bitcoin for transaction fees. And chances are in the future, maybe accept, US dollars in some way. But there's no reason to invent a new currency for this.
And the liquid sidechain is useful in other ways. Like even in Dominic Frisby's presentation, he talked about all of these privacy coins. And sure, Monero at its base level is more private than Bitcoin. But how do the majority of the people use Monero? Because nobody accepts it. Well, you have your Bitcoin, you go to an exchange, you convert it into Monero, and then you convert it back into Bitcoin, and now you think that your Bitcoin has been anonymized, and which is partially true, except you used a centralized exchange to do it. And you took on Monero's currency volatility risk, which is way higher than Bitcoin's, and it was a giant annoyance. But now, with the liquid sidechain, you can move that Bitcoin into liquid Bitcoin, not take on any crazy currency risk, stay within the Bitcoin protocol, come back into Bitcoin, and you just did the same thing without going through a centralized exchange.
Yeah. So do you think that Liquid's going to end up being used by companies as payment providers? So it won't just be like it will be an accepted currency, for example.
No, I think Lightning will take care of that problem.
Liquid has very stiff competition in terms of Lightning.
Yeah.
I mean, if I was in Blockstream's position, I would be kind of dubious about getting involved in Liquid at all, because it's tough to compete with Lightning. And there's so many ways to create things with Lightning technology that acts, like the promises Liquid has. I think the main thing that Liquid can do is just much more capital efficient. Like the reality is Lightning is not capital efficient. You get all this money locked up in channels, which doesn't really matter for a big class of problems. but for inter-exchange payments.
Yeah.
That, that float is valuable.
Well, and again, you're way more. I mean, I know just the basics of it, but the original Color Coins project which was way ahead of its time, can probably now be potentially recreated because you can probably put the Lightning infrastructure on top of Liquid.
Well, in fact, I'm working on this kind of thing, and if you're doing colored coins, well, I mean, more generally, just
you want to define color coins?
Yeah,
for
the
people?
color coin was just, I think, a somewhat silly thing of tracking Bitcoin transaction outputs, essentially to create an accounting system for tokens. And the way I'd more generally call it is just tokenization, and that's just that's
right. But it's tokenization without creating your own money.
Yeah. Like when I say tokens, I'm talking about things like this thing represents a gold bar that some trusted entity has.
Right.
Tether is tokenization.
Okay. So it would be Bitcoin is represents a specific.
Right. So every Satoshi is representing, let's say, a share of Apple stock. Yeah. The thing that a Satoshi is representing is worth so much more than the value of a Satoshi. The fact that it's on Bitcoin, but you don't want to do this on the Bitcoin base layer because that's going to be insane. It's going to chew up. The blockchain will be too expensive to send. But something like the combination of Lightning and Liquid can finally achieve this.
The truth is, at a technical level, colored coins was a silly idea. It kind of looks cool on paper, but when you really think about it, there's far better ways to do this. And essentially, you can create data structures that you link to Bitcoin in the sense that because Bitcoin can't be double spent, because you have a unique set of history. Once you have one thing that's unique, you can leverage it to make another thing unique. Because you say, for a new state in my other system to be valid, it has to be linked to spending a Bitcoin transaction output. And you only spend a Bitcoin transaction output in one way. You spend it once. You can't spend it twice. Well, that once spend, you link it to some other action cryptographically. And now this other thing, it can only happen in one way. Yeah. If that other thing's a ledger of transactions, now you have something with respect to double spend security and validation is every bit as secure as Bitcoin. It probably won't be as secure with respect to censorship risk, but when you're talking about a token, like you have a central issuer anyway. You can't get away from that risk. Yeah. So having really honest accounting can be very valuable.
Well, I think you hit a good point there, which is that there's an element of centralization, especially if it's like a security, if it's an asset, for example. There's going to be someone who is in control of it. So
stocks are inherently centralized around the company that they're based on.
Yeah, I mean, well, even if you have obviously you create a security token, there's still going to be an element of centralization there. So I think there's probably I can see more. I can see side chains being more, and maybe I'm slightly biased because I'm actually testing a fork of Elements at the moment, and but I can just really see that as being the infrastructure that actually takes over. Rather than using tokens and Ethereum, you'll have like side chains where you have a representative of different securities or whatever pegged back to Bitcoin in some way, or at least secured via the blockchain. But yeah, because at the moment, there's just too many tokens, I must admit.
The simple reality is the only reason they exist is for people to go make money.
Yeah.
There's just no technical argument for them in the vast majority of cases. There's a few weird exceptions like, prediction markets where it's inherent to the game theory of the system. But those are the exceptions. And they're very rare compared to the much more common thing of, well, we want to go and, do a blockchain to go track like shipping container movements. Yeah. How are we going to fund this?
Yeah. But even then, like, sure, you may need some kind of an element inside your system that could make transactions more expensive or less expensive in order to control, the input. But like, you shouldn't have to invent money to do it.
I'm not even talking about that example. Like, I'm just talking about the rare examples with Augur is one example where it being a separate currency is a requirement for the game theory to work. Not an anti-spam measure. It's an actual requirement for the game theory of the system work. But that's why these counterexamples are so rare.
Yeah.
You know, Namecoin, I think, is a good example of something which did not need a separate currency because it does not have that you know, game theory need within it. Now, Namecoin's also very insecure because of merge mining, but if you all your goal is create a DNS system with, you know, the way Namecoin did, you do not need a separate currency for it. But people do this because
money printing.
Oh, hey, so
now Namecoin didn't, so it's too early to kind of get onto the scammy money printing side. But a Namecoin invented now, that's exactly how people would do it. They just want that investment money.
Hey, Peter, can you elaborate on the fact what you just said that merge mining is insecure? And the reason why I ask this is, I forgot where I was the last time I saw Alex Petrov do a presentation. And in this presentation, you know, the BitFury is their logo, and they're affiliated with a project called Emercoin or Americoin. It's one of the Russian. And I called that project a scam back in the day, but that was before they started merge mining, and now they're merge mining. And I asked Alex Petrov about it. Hey, why are you guys affiliated with Emercoin or Americoin? I don't remember. It's with an E, whatever, like this purple logo. And then he told me, well, now that they're merge mining with Bitcoin, it has become an interesting blockchain. And it didn't make sense to me. And I always go back. I'm sorry, we're off on a little tangent here. And I always go back to the days, my early days of like 2014, like early 2014. I meet Dan O'Prey, if you know who that is, the creator of Hyperledger. Yeah. This is long before, you know, it got bought by Blythe Masters and then handed over to IBM, and God knows what happened, right? But this is back when he was building it. And I remember at the New York Bitcoin Center, I'm standing next to him, and I've chatted with him online. And he spent about 10 to 15 minutes trying to explain Hyperledgers to me, and I was a noob. And I remember staring at him every time he'd say something, and I'd look at him and I'm like, I don't get it. And then I walked away from that presentation. Then I walked away from that discussion. I went home, and I'm like, wow, I must be a total idiot. I just don't understand what the hell this is, how it works. They didn't have a coin, so at least it wasn't scammy. But it just never made sense to me. And then it wasn't until like a year later, in 2015, when I realized it was never supposed to make sense to me. Yeah. Like, so please explain why merge mining is an insane idea, because that's where every single proof of work is headed, because they will have a mining death spiral. No one's going to mine their shit, and they have two choices: go POS or go merge mining. Please define merge mining and why it's stupid.
Well, I can't, because I'm actually a giant scammer. And no, like, so first of all, like, what is merge mining? Well, it's this idea that, well, first of all, what is proof of work? It's the idea that you have a data structure where we control which version of that data structure is the authoritative one by saying it's the one that is both valid, follows the rules, and also destroys more energy than the competitors. And if you combine that with an incentive to, you know, create more additions to that data structure, more blocks in case of blockchain, you get this lovely coupled thing where people have an incentive to go and extend the thing that's valid with the most work. You know, that's all well and beautiful. Now, the problem with that is if you try to create a new system, you start off with very little incentive to mine it. It makes it very easy to just overtake it by throwing away some money and, you know, mining bullshit, basically, you know, mining empty blocks, whatever. You can do all kinds of things if you're willing to throw some money away. Now, at least you provably have to throw money away. It's better than nothing, but it's a pretty weak thing. So merge mining says, all right, we're going to be clever. We're going to say a valid block in the definition of the system is allowed to be something that attempted to also mine something else. So like Namecoin is an example. A valid Namecoin block can be something that you've proven that you did some work, but the work can be actually to create a Bitcoin block. And the difficulty on Namecoin is separate, but because you can do both at the same time, the reality is that your marginal cost to create a Namecoin block, if you're already mining Bitcoin, is zero. You know, ignoring like, you know, setting up a node and other stuff like that. But, you know, ignoring that part, the actual marginal technical cost is zero because, you know, it's just a couple little bits of silicon that go and turned on that are totally irrelevant. Like, it's just, it doesn't affect the Bitcoin mining in any way.
So it's a Bitcoin miner that also adds some code saying when I find a Bitcoin block, also find one of these blocks?
So at a technical level, basically you put a commitment to the Namecoin block in your Bitcoin block, and adding that is essentially free. Now, the problem with this is, well, now you've actually reduced your attack cost even further, depending on the scenario. Now people can attack your coin at zero cost.
Yeah.
And also, when I said free, that's not quite true, though, because if you want to earn money on this, you also have to go run a node. And running a node is it's not a marginal cost. It is an upfront cost.
It's trivial, though, right?
It isn't, though. Not if you have thousands of these things. And the problem is, like, I think why the likes of Bitfury like this stuff is it makes mining no longer a commodity industry. Now it adds value. Now you got to actually put a lot of upfront effort into mining, because managing this in this world of thousands of little merge mine coins, the upfront cost of managing this is really high, but your marginal cost is really low. So it's exactly what you need if you want to take something that should be decentralized and monopolize it.
So what we're saying is, so for Bitfury, because they're a big private miner, if they're a believer in Emercoin, they pretty much know that they can fully control that that blockchain if they want to with their miners, because nobody else gives a shit.
Yeah, well, and on top of this, so there's two issues there. One is what you just said there, where because it's merge mining, for zero additional costs, they can fully control this thing and do what they want. And on top of this, if there is money to be made in mining Emercoin, their competitors can't, because they don't have the upfront infrastructure to mine all 1,000 little silly merge mine coins. It's very, very anti-Bitcoin. I mean, I'm quite happy to say merge mining is an attack on Bitcoin, and unfortunately, it's an attack where it's tricky to know how to defend against, because it is somewhat outside the rules of the system. It's sort of like if governments offered money to attack Bitcoin for Bitcoin miners, mine blocks that just had no transactions. Yeah. That's something that's outside, that exists outside of the rules of the system. Yeah. And it's very tough to come up with defenses for that.
Wait. I don't follow that view. I don't see how merge mining is an attack, because that's like saying that Emercoin will one day be the main, will overtake the Bitcoin blockchain.
Because now the people mining it, who can only mine it by being centralized, are earning more money per unit hash.
Changes the incentive.
Yes.
Oh, so by also mining a shit coin that they can sell.
Yes, because now they can put more money in. The difficulty goes up, making the competitors who are mining in a more decentralized way with lower overhead at a disadvantage. Anytime we create an advantage between more centralized miners versus less, we have centralized Bitcoin. And it's essentially it's a block size increase. There's more data you need to process.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. So if Bitfury is a promoter of a merged mined coin, and I'm talking about it now, so it's not on my channel, but it's on your channel. So now more people are aware this coin exists, and people love to buy shit that I call scams. So now more people are going to go out and speculate on Emercoin, which gives Bitfury more money, because they have like a 95% dominance of mining Emercoin, and because people are stupid and they don't care that it's not decentralized at all, they don't care. Bitfury makes more money, they can buy more equipment, and they can sell that scam coin.
Yep. Yeah, it's essentially one way of looking at it is it's fundraising for a centralized miner that other people can't copy that business model, which is ultimately an indirect attack on Bitcoin. It's not quite as direct as saying, hey, please give us money, we're going to go and directly 51% attack Bitcoin. But the effect is ultimately that.
So do you think there needs to be a technical change, if it's possible, to kind of remove that attack vector?
The truth is, I don't know how to make that technical change. Yeah. Merge mining is, it doesn't really need permission. Yeah. It's very difficult to find a robust way to block it. I mean, obviously, if they're merge mining with a particular protocol, obviously you could soft forked out the particular way of doing it. But there's an infinite variety of particular ways you could commit to your merge mine chain. Yeah. So how do you robustly stop this? I don't know.
So this creates very interesting potential new scam areas. So for example, you take, slush pool is too honest, right? So let's go with F2 pool, right? F2 pool, like for example, F2 pool can now create F2 pool coin, which is a merge mine coin that they can pay out as rewards, like the Steemit scam, to the people mining in their pool, merge mining F2 pool coin, which costs them nothing as the pool organizer, but now they can like give away another coin of value that the pool contributors can now sell to stupid people.
Well, see, so the one defense we do have is sort of not so much an active defense, which is that, but it's that vast majority of merge mine coins are just dumb and don't make any sense. Like your example of F2 pool, it sounds like a ridiculous attack, but the reason why it sounds like a ridiculous attack is because F2 pool is worthless. You know, or sorry, F2 pool coin is worthless in that example.
Well, so is the Steemit coin, but they got everyone to believe in it that if they put their content on the most centralized website known to man, where 30 people control what goes to the top, you get paid in Steemit coin, and then you get to sell that, and somehow magically you get rich.
But I mean, at least there's a natural sort of upper bound to how big scams like that can get. You know, there's not that many suckers
Ethereum.
in the world. Well, Ethereum is like 10%. Ethereum is like 10% the size of Bitcoin. You know, right there, I think that actually shows there's sort of upper bounds. You know,
I've got a love-hate thing with Ethereum, because ultimately, as a business analyst, you know, for me, it's all about use cases and satisfying use cases. And Ethereum works as a universal, round the world, throw money at something, you know, changing the kind of landscape.
Oh, no, it definitely filled a niche of, I want to print my own money for my own dumb idea. It definitely filled that niche.
Oh, yeah, sure. But I think at the same time, there's certain, I like the idea of like, tokenization of certain assets. You know, I think there's a novelty factor of certain things.
Yeah, no, and I'm okay with that. I'm perfectly okay with tokenizing assets as long as you're not making up your own money and you're not breaking security law. There's a reason why security law exists. Right.
Around.
And also, as long as you're not soliciting money from strangers. That was always one of my problems.
Well, I mean, the irony is, like, I think it's often much more ethical to just straight up solicit investment for an unregistered security and blatantly violate your SEC laws than it is for any of these utility tokens, which might technically be legal, but they're far worse for the consumer. You're getting nothing in return.
Yeah.
You know, like when I go and invest in a illegal stock offering, it's pretty clear what I'm getting.
Yeah.
Maybe not very much, but that's often still more than any of these crazy utility tokens, which then simultaneously say, well, we're not actually investments in anything. You don't actually get anything for this.
Like no voting rights. No.
Yeah. That's a worse position to be in.
No, it was amazing. Like back in the early days of ICOs, and they're like, well, we're not technically an illegal security because unlike a stock, we're not offering you anything.
Yeah.
Like,
that's what the hilarious thing is. Like, you read the terms, it basically says, like, we can do anything. We're going to take your money. There may not be a product at the end of it. You know, you don't own anything, no rights, no nothing. And people are just like, But I think a lot of people made a lot of money and were just like, we're just throwing it out. And I must admit, I probably chucked a load into multiple different ICOs, but part of the reason is because I just thought I need to like diversify a bit, and but they had appeal to people that
lost out on the on other gains.
Yeah, and I think that's it. It's like and it's the even now when I explain Bitcoin, people, the first thing they do is go, oh yeah, but Bitcoin's already like $10,000. So and so is at X, and people, there's so many basic lessons that people don't kind of know. And
well, the truth is there is more upside to these ICOs because they have this small potential of getting bigger. Yeah, it doesn't mean that there's any real value to it. It doesn't mean that on average they'll have upside.
They also have marketing budgets.
It is possible for them to get bigger than as a percentage than Bitcoin can.
Especially in a short period of time.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is, like, Bitcoin cannot grow to as many more, to as many zeros as an ICO can, because if Bitcoin added, say, 3 zeros, it would be bigger than fiat currencies. Yeah. Like I'm sorry, it's not going to repeat its growth from, I mean, when I first bought it to 20 cents, I'll tell you, only buying $20 is a bad idea. But, it cannot repeat that growth. Yeah. The world is not big enough.
And it's the pump value, right? Like there's almost nobody in the world you can get to mention the word Bitcoin publicly and have it at a zero. But there are plenty of people where you can get them to say the name of your coin publicly, and it can grow 6 zeros.
Yeah.
Just by mentioning your coin by a specific prominent person. And we have Trump can say the word Bitcoin and nothing happens.
Yeah. Very interesting. But is it because Bitcoin is still viewed as this nefarious thing? You know, a lot of people don't. Some people don't like the fact that it hasn't got a creator. You know,
I don't think it's anything. I think it's a very simple thing. Bitcoin, most of the world's population. You know, I mean, actually, if you were to do raw numbers, I wouldn't be surprised. Like 10% of the world's population know what Bitcoin is.
Do you think?
And,
I say it's well
in Canada. There's been like public, studies on this, and apparently the numbers are like 75-80% of Canada's population know what Bitcoin is.
I would raise those numbers. I mean, if you separate the public from those that are, I guess, computer and internet literate and have smartphones.
Oh yeah, that's like 99%.
Right. I mean, if you limit this to, let's say, anyone 15 and above, that's on Facebook and on social media.
Yeah.
There's like, I'd say 70-80% of them have a pretty good idea of what Bitcoin is.
I personally cannot remember the last time I met someone who didn't know what Bitcoin was.
Yeah. Whether they heard of it, but didn't know really what it was.
Yeah, it's always been that they know what the term is and they have an idea about money. Yeah, they might not know how it works, but I have a funny story with that. Even like quite a few years, maybe 2015, if I remember correctly. I was off in rural Appalachian, middle of nowhere in the U.S. It would be West Virginia. And,
that's pretty much middle of nowhere.
Yeah. Well, and we were, we had to go kilometers on this dirt road to get to the house. We're going to explore some caves. And we're at this place where no cell phone service, no nothing. I mean, they, had their own well, had their own generator, no electricity, any of that. And there's this, grandmother, about her 80s, we're talking about what we do. It's, that Bitcoin thing. Yeah. And quickly I realized, like, not only does she know what it was, she could explain how it worked. Not at like not a super technical level, but she totally understood. Yeah, it's this blockchain thing, and it adds blocks to it, and then people burn computing power to, keep that, make that the only version of history. Like that's kind of the level she understood at, and she totally got it. I
actually find when talking about Bitcoin that there's kind of and especially I was known as Dan, bearded Bitcoin Dan or whatever at work, and no one not trusted, but believed in Bitcoin as a concept. But what I realized is that when I spoke to like retirees, like people that have 70 and above, they got it. Like it's almost like, I don't know, there's something about the way things used to be that people could see how bad things have got with fiat money. I don't think a lot of people sort of are.
Well, I found. I mean, my own dad, for instance, he's an economist, very conventional sort of Keynesian economist. And I remember when I explained to him what Bitcoin was, he totally understood why it would be valuable. It just seemed totally obvious to him. Oh yeah, it's effectively acts as collectible. Of course, it's going to be valuable. You can send it over the internet.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't it be valuable?
Yeah.
Limited supply. That's all you need to know.
So, what in your opinion, what do you think? The merge mining is one attack vector. What do you think are possibly other, either technical or non-technical attack vectors to Bitcoin?
I think in terms of sort of value lost, aggressively banning it would lose a lot of value. Like just
would that also pump it? Because
it's more collectible. When I say aggressively, I mean like in major economies.
Yeah.
If the U.S. said, "All right, Bitcoin's illegal. We're going to arrest anyone who goes and works on it, accepts it, so on." Like it or not, that's going to reduce the value. But when you talk about threats like that, remember the U.S. can also end all life on this planet.
Yeah.
Like set off their nukes and so on. And there's many more things that make this less likely to happen.
Yeah.
First of all, being that Bitcoin's useful to politicians themselves, Bitcoin's useful to many companies, and we just don't seem to have that kind of risk. And you use a lot of political capital banning something like Bitcoin, which you don't use banning something like Libra.
Yeah.
Libra, I think, has a very real chance of never really getting off the ground without at least major changes.
Yeah.
Because of these big incentives to not allow it to. And it's so vulnerable. Bitcoin doesn't have that vulnerability in the same way. And, I think governments, they really don't like the idea of banning something that's failing at it. I don't think they want to repeat the drug war.
The alcohol prohibition.
Yeah. Certainly elements within government would like a repeat of the drug war.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's plenty of, financial agencies who would love to go and get more funding by trying to ban something and failing at it.
Yeah.
Like that's a great way to expand your bureaucracy.
Yeah.
But I don't think politicians have that interest. They would rather send that pork barrel money to somewhere else that'll get more votes. Banning Bitcoin, it's not hated enough. And it's tough to get into that place because the public, I think, is skeptical of a lot of these arguments. They're skeptical of, well, we got to do this for the children because they've seen this happen before and they've seen how corrupt it was.
So with the immutability of Bitcoin, is one of the biggest. It's like it's the pillar. It's the fact that it's an immutable database. What about a while back? There was a reference that someone had hashed in a reference to a kiddie site. Do you think there's a risk from that side? People referencing things on the blockchain.
But you're referencing something on the internet. You can just go and ban that site.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the issue with that too is you can repeat that type of attack on many, many different systems.
Yeah.
I mean, you could do this on the certificate transparency chains as an example, which underpin internet security these days. Like it's too easy to play games like that. And I can definitely see some people trying to do that kind of banning, but it'll backfire when you repeat that same trick in many other places.
Yeah.
It's just not something I think sane people want to go down the path of, especially when Bitcoin is one of your most expensive ever data distribution systems. It is so inefficient to get anything of worthwhile on Bitcoin because of the limited block size. BSV might actually have issues with this because it's just so easy to buy space and spam it. Bitcoin, it just looks laughable to say, oh yeah, you think this is a big issue when it costs, dollars put in tiny bits of text.
But BSV's got gigamegs though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Gigamegs.
Remember that? BSV, you can get the gigabyte blocks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a different kind of trade-off there and a different sort of story.
Yeah. And do you think that, BSV, do you think we're done with those forks, or do you think that there's going to be a BSV will fork again, or so?
They're not going away anytime soon, but they also don't matter.
Yeah. I think they've dropped they're insignificant.
Like I own some BSV because, of course, the fork works that way. Yeah, and it's just not worth enough for me to even bother looking up how to get rid of it. Like, I'm sorry, but
I don't think I have any.
1% or something.
I don't think I have any because I sold all of my Bcash.
Well,
before the split of the BSV chain.
Yeah, I didn't bother selling all my Bcash. Thus, I both have some Bcash and some BSV. I just. Yeah.
Well, that was a terrible investment because that thing is now 2.5% of a Bitcoin.
Well,
the Bcash stuff. But you didn't dox yourself like some of us because I had a bunch of coins in cold storage since 2013. Not a bunch, but more than I'd like to share. And I had to dox all that in order to, split.
Well, the simple reality was the coin, some of the coins I had, it just wasn't worth it for me to go to the effort of even selling it for Bcash at, what would be at the height, like 20-30%. Wasn't worth it for me to do that.
Yeah, I wish I got that price.
Yeah, let alone for even now, let alone for BSV, which is it's such a small percentage. So why would I put my coins at risk?
Yeah.
So this goes into the whole big debate with the IRS that just announced about the forks and their value, and there's lots of confusion there. So did you owe taxes on your Bcash fork the moment the fork happened, or like for someone like Peter, even though you're not an American, but if you were an American, like if you never split your coins, does that count? I mean, you never recorded your value on the blockchain, so so this is a big confusion. Do you owe Bcash taxes if you were an American?
Some people have interpreted that in the context of the IRS is assuming we all have custodial wallets, which are managing it all for us.
Yeah.
And that's that would be the sanest interpretation. And in that case, because you are actually receiving it by the custodial wallet dealing with it, that's a somewhat sane interpretation, I guess. Although even then, it creates like, imagine you go on a trip, one of these blockchains split, and you just don't have access to your money, or don't even know. I mean, you're often, you're up in rural Australia on a sheep
you don't
farm.
Want it.
Like
that's the main
the
thing.
point is like even in a custodial situation, you're in rural Australia on a sheep farm.
Yeah.
You may not necessarily realize that any of this has happened until the price has crashed. And the IRS is saying, no, the price you owe is way up here. That's insane.
It needs to be, I think, if anything, if they are going to try and tax it, it needs to be on a the point it's liquidated or moved. It doesn't exist until.
But they do But they do say the moment it hits the blockchain. So that could mean the moment you personally split or the moment the exchange splits for you. So if the exchange split for you and your like this is the worst case scenario when your Bitcoin is at an exchange. You are off somewhere in rural Africa. The exchange splits it for
rural
you.
Africa has much better internet access than rural Australia.
Rural Australia?
I know.
Maybe very north Canada, up near the North Pole. And like the exchange splits it for you. Like, we did you a favor. We didn't want to sell it for you, but we just left it for you in your account for you to decide. And then everybody else sells for tax reasons, and you're screwed.
And it's interesting that this could also create incredible selling pressure. Because if exchanges,
which is what I said. This just basically killed the hard fork attack because now everyone's going to be incentivized to sell your shitcoin fork immediately. And just destroy it.
That's actually that's a good countermeasure, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I said that. I said the IRS just became a bigger Bitcoin maximalist, trying to make sure hard forks never have any value again.
So I suspect what will actually happen is IRS will try to rake some people over the coals, and judges are going to look at this and say, "You're crazy. This makes no sense at all." And it'll get revised with saner interpretations.
Because I think in the UK they said airdrops. The tax guidance came out in December last year. I think airdrops, forks, all of that. You have to declare it as an income essentially, but not an income. Sorry. You have to declare that you've received it, even if you don't want to use it. So technically, you've got to pay and I think that's ludicrous. You can't pay tax on something that you've never transacted. Tax is based on a transaction.
Right. Well, this also goes into this concept of free money, right? And there's also such thing as free money, but people think there is free money. And so I'm going to ask this question to Peter. And something like Richard Hart's Hex scam. And people are like, why are you complaining? He's giving you something of value for free. Why is that so scammy? Please enlighten us.
Well, very frequently you're not actually getting it. Very frequently the real scam is to others, because by giving it to you for free is actually advertising to get more suckers in. And of course there are very real tax consequences. In fact, in Canada, so there's an interesting example with stock options, where in this bankrupts people. People, because of the tax treatment, people will wind up bankrupt due to this.
No, not stock options. This is why they started stock options, when they were giving away stock.
I'll give you an example. So a concrete example of a bad tax situation in Canada, which is why I don't necessarily have high hopes for a similar thing with airdrops. But so if you get a stock option and under certain circumstances, even though it's a completely illiquid stock option and you literally cannot sell it, Revenue Canada will go say, all right, that was the theoretical price. You now owe taxes on that price, even if you never sell it and the company goes bankrupt, you have to go pay this. And, I know through other consultants I know of people who have been bankrupted by this because Revenue Canada will hold firm on this. And the reason why it happens, of course, because the people who this affects are mainly consultants, not in very big numbers. It's an arcane interpretation of the rules. And it usually doesn't happen because usually companies in Canada will pre-sell part of it to cover your tax obligations. And it's just, it doesn't come up. But if they screw that up, Revenue Canada will go after you to the point of bankruptcy, and they don't care because it's bureaucratic checkmark. And
in the US, I guess the law is a little different. This is why they started doing stock options, because back in the day when they used to give you stock, and the company would give you stock for your loyalty and working there, and then you hold that stock and you're supposed to pay the taxes of when you received it. But then the company goes bust, and this was the big problem during .com days. The company goes bust and you owe it, but now they give you a stock option to convert that into a stock. And the moment you convert it into a stock, that's when you own the taxes. And when you convert it into a stock, the company that is converting it into a stock will automatically withhold the taxes. Yeah. This is because so many people got wrecked by the IRS when they took the stock that the company was giving them, and the stock then crashed.
I was in the well, I think we called it a share save in the UK, but it was quite lucky because it was in 2008. So when I joined, right when it's a financial company, so all the markets is shit the bed. So it turned out all right. But with that, when we chose to redeem them, so you say yes or no, we didn't have to pay tax then. It was only when we were actually liquidating it. And again, that just seems so much more logical, especially when you have to imagine, you pay the tax and then the next day it dumps. So it was at that point fair enough, and you could have sold it, but you've paid the tax on it. But then the next day it's down 50% or whatever. Yeah, and it's just it's not a fair way of doing things. And going back to what we were saying earlier about if tax was more reasonable, people would be less likely to go scoot around it. And I think that they're just
less angry at it.
Yeah, and I think the same's going to happen in crypto. Like people, if it's too hardcore, then people are going to hold stuff back, and they're not going to
Well, like a good example with this is the treatment of capital gains on Bitcoin sold for just day-to-day purchases. In theory, by the IRS interpretation, every time you go off and buy a coffee with Lightning, that's supposed to be a taxable event and recorded. And it's so stupid.
Right. They're supposed to have a like on currencies, because you can have you have capital gains, and you have long-term capital gains and short-term capital gains if you're a currency trader. But the government at least somewhat understands that currencies are currencies, which is why if I leave, we're in Romania now, if I leave Romania with like $200 or $300 worth of Romanian currency, and I bring that home with me, and then that's not taxable, if whether that $200 or $300 goes up or down, because there is an exception for a reasonable amount of currency that would be used for day-to-day transactions that does not count, that because they know that you're not using it for speculative purposes. So Bitcoin needs to have that kind of exemption, where if you only have like less than $1,000 in Bitcoin that you're using for day-to-day spending, the purpose of you having it is not for speculative gains. At least at this point in Bitcoin's speculative, and there needs to be exceptions for that, so that your cups of coffee are not capital gains liable.
Like you can argue sort of the general catch-all de minimis exemption, but it's always safer when they've actually ruled on this.
Yeah.
Is they will be unreasonable. Like the ugly reality is they're happy but unreasonable.
The first thing they do is put the wall up, and they get feedback. Then
Well, it's like this whole business of them going after people who are accidentally, or often without their knowledge, technically American citizens, and saying no, you got to go pay all these penalties because you didn't file your taxes. Well, why are they an American citizen? Because it turns out when they were born, the plane had diverted to America, and people often it happens when people get nailed for this stuff when they literally had no idea. An example I heard about is they'd never even seen their own birth certificate because their parents were sketchy. Yeah. Well, suddenly the American say, oh, no, we have records that you were born here. Yeah. I don't know that. My parents always said I was born in, Europe. And yet they get nailed for this stuff. Well, that's just stupid. It's so stupid.
Do you think that they will come up with a law, that states that, $500 up to $500, say, for example, in Bitcoin, if you spend that much, then it's not,
all you need to do is just say, it's treated as a currency for that purpose, just like any other currency. I think this is likely to be something where what really happens is they want to go strangle Bitcoin. And when I say they, I'm really talking about a part of the U.S. government who may dislike Bitcoin and they may want to strangle it, and they'll do this through silly rules like this. Now, does that really reflect the whole U.S. government? Well, there is no such thing as the whole U.S. government. Certainly other parts would be looking at the IRS thinking, you guys are idiots. other parts of the IRS would be looking at the people in the IRS thinking you guys are idiots. But you can totally see that being a way to, clamp down on these things by saying, well, now we can gatekeep what you decide is currency. In much the same way as that you could easily imagine this happening to other foreign currencies. If there were if people start moving money into outside the US dollar, I could easily imagine that type of tax treatment just being used as yet another way that you clamp down on this. I'm sure we could find examples of that in other countries where, tax treatments for foreign currencies are ridiculous in exactly this way.
I suppose anywhere with strong capital controls, like, I suppose, I think South Africa's still got quite pretty strong capital controls. But this is why Bitcoin's such a good use case, because you're able to transact. It doesn't matter where you are. You've got, if you remember your 12-word seed, you can store billions, trillions, unlimited amounts in that seed. And that's what's so cool, is that it doesn't exist anywhere.
Let's be a bit realistic. Not necessarily billions. Good luck getting your liquidity to sell it.
Oh yeah,
but
what I mean is, in X amount of time.
The point I would make is Bitcoin levels the playing field. The reality is, rich people can move money around the world untraceably.
Yeah,
that's the world we live in.
Yeah,
and if you don't think that's true, well, go talk to financial crimes prosecutors. I actually have, and they'll say that over and over again. Like that's the world we live in.
Yeah.
Bitcoin levels a playing field by letting the little guy get access to the exact same things the rich and powerful do.
Yeah. Well, I think that one other thing that kind of pricked people's ears up was, interestingly, around divorces. So
Jimmy Song was an expert witness at one of those. It was actually a very interesting case.
Yeah. Okay. Can you elaborate?
I don't know if I can.
But
it was a very interesting case where the guy was an early Bitcoiner, and even he, early Bitcoiners, how they became Silk Road and all that stuff. So the guy literally, genuinely did not remember how much Bitcoin he had or where he had it, and Jimmy Song was basically like doing it like almost for him, trying to figure out how much Bitcoin this guy has, because they're in the middle of a divorce case. So it's a very, very interesting case. You should have him on the show one day, and I'm sure he'll discuss what's publicly said in the courtroom.
But that's conceptually, it's such a ridiculous thing, and it kind of goes back to the libel part. For example, I could say you have 100 Bitcoin. And someone is into Bitcoin. So my girlfriend, for example, she could say, right, we split up, and she's like, right, he's got 700 Bitcoin because he's into crypto, and I know he's got 700 Bitcoin.
Although that's not unique to Bitcoin. I mean, there's an example I read about I think last year of.
I'll just say, no, she's mistaken. It was Bitcoin Cash, which is now worth zero.
Yeah. No, I read about, for instance, an example of a 70-year-old man. I think it might actually be a divorce case, but effectively all this happened to him, and it wasn't Bitcoin.
Yeah.
It was just the wife had claimed he had money in offshore accounts.
Oh, right, yeah.
He claimed he didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't like, sort of the Swiss bank offshore accounts. It was just, he had a business in the Bahamas.
Yeah.
And the Bahamian government, well, they don't have the records for it.
Yeah.
The wife claims he did. And what probably really happened was the judge was friendly with the wife and decided, we'll stick your husband in jail till he rots.
What?
Well, because he got charged with contempt of court.
Right. This is the contempt of court challenge, which in the U.S. really needs to be challenged in Supreme Court one day. Martin Armstrong almost got that case to the Supreme Court because he spent like over 5 years on a contempt of court charge. So like they're not really charging you with anything. They're just throw you in jail until you turn over evidence, which you may or may not have.
That's ridiculous. That's literally absurd. Burden of proof is on
the court.
But remember, in this case, the court had decided the burden of proof is shown that this man does have these offshore assets. And once that burden of proof is shown, you can rot in jail indefinitely until you turn it over. Now, it can still be totally wrong, and the burden. And I'd have to. I think the burden of proof, because this is a civil case, and I think the burden of proof for the contempt of court is still the criminal standard. But I mean, the criminal standard gets wrong people in jail for wrong reasons all the time. Yeah. And also, what is a standard when you're, for instance, talking about encrypted data?
Yeah.
like the nature of encryption is really ugly. The nature of owning assets in the Bahamas is really ugly. You know, there's no way you can prove a negative.
Yeah.
Now, you can prove it to court satisfaction, or you can disprove it to court satisfaction, but people will wind up in jail who are innocent for things like this.
There's probably going to be an explosion of this as well, like through the it's because of the fact that
with encrypted data, I suspect this is the kind of thing where police would love the ability to throw people in jail and not actually have to prove it to a high standard.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's the worrying thing.
Yeah,
I think that there needs to be a standard of minimum evidence. Like,
I mean, but remember, the question is, how do you evaluate the standard? What we've seen in forensics is much of forensics is just total BS. You know, so much of forensics, so-called science, was not based on science. They fought, you know, like right now, the FBI is fighting researchers trying to get access to the fingerprint databases so they can go show, well, false positives are actually really common, because there's strong evidence that's true. And the FBI does not want to give access to these people because it would show that they hadn't actually done any science on fingerprint analysis. You know, had it, you know, proper science, you would say, well, let's go do the studies. Let's take random samples. Let's fingerprint people. You know, let's check what the false positive rates are. And this hasn't actually been done. DNA is same issue. DNA analysis is nowhere near as good as we think it is watching, you know, the likes of CSI, because
forensic files.
Yeah, it's not like they sequence your whole genetics and match it. No, they go take, you know, a couple markers. And if you do the stats on it, you find out false positives are actually really common.
Especially in families, they share a lot more.
Yep.
Yes, I'm gonna go back in, catch some presentations.
Catch you in a bit.
Yeah.
Hopefully you guys get more people to fill in the seats. And this streamed on WCN?
WCN, yeah.
All right, I'm going to try to retweet that. We had some good discussions on merge mining and other stuff.
Yeah, awesome.
Cool. Thanks, guys.